The All Black legend Murray Mexted joins us. Well, we've got a whole heap of questions. To start with, though, before we get into your area of expertise, and that's the loose forwards, Mex, just where are we at after those first three test matches? And are we, I suppose the saying is, trending in the right direction?
Well, yeah. I've been waiting with bated breath to see Raza play his hand. And, I wondered what sort of team he had announced and what changes would be for the second test, et cetera, and the third, of course. So now I've formed an opinion, which is really good. He is clearly a man to put team before individual. And you'll appreciate, Martin, that the last regime were all about building depth and rotation of players. But he's not. He's about team. And I'm absolutely delighted about that because, if you've got a team that wants to do the business together, everyone's got to be on board, not three-quarters of them. And that's why I was so disillusioned and disappointed with the New Zealand Rugby Union when they made the announcement that, our All Black coach would be sacked after the World Cup. What does that say to the guys that he doesn't pick? It says, well, you're not on my team, and they sort of lose a bit of heart and it breaks down the fabric of the team. So this is really good. What we're seeing is team first. And the team played well, considering it was their first game of the international season, and England had played a few already, a lot probably, not sure how many. So team first, and he was consistent with his selections. He picked most of it, was all but one injury, wasn't it, for the second test against England.
That's right.
So he rewarded the players that performed and won. Because you're playing against a world-class opposition now. This is not Super Rugby, and people forget that you can look good in Super Rugby, but you go up that next step and it's a little bit harder, and more players get exposed. So I think what actually happened during the English series is that those two matches did expose a number of players, and that's because this level is the highest level. So he now has got a good picture of those players, the incumbents, we'll call them. And so now we move on going forward because Fiji, you'd have to say, was not quite at the same level.
No, of course not.
As England, and it was played in America. So there was a little wee bit of sort of, this is an opportunity to have a look at a few players, and that's what they did. And I think it's marvellous. They've given everybody in the squad a game, and so they now know where they are. So, you look at the picture now, Martin, I look at the whole situation of the All Black team and I say, well, how are we looking going forward?
Yes.
And I'd say we're looking at the early stages of what I hope, like hell, will be a very successful tenure under Raza Robertson. But there is a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
a hell of a lot of work.
There is.
Because if you look at that All Black team, and I sit there and I look at the positions that are announced, I watch them play, and then I look at what happens next week, you'd have to say that the only position in the All Black team that's steady now is the front row. And that's because Jason Ryan has been in that role for, I don't know, how long is it, 2 years?
Yeah, almost 2 years, yeah.
So he has built a new front row, hasn't he? You'd have to say that front row is different. And they are united. They've got plenty of size, plenty of power, plenty of youth. There's a whole lot of everything. So I'm really happy with the way the front row is. But if you say, well, Murray, you were a loose forward, what do you think of the loose forwards? Well, nobody would know. There's a whole 12 months of work to be done with the loose forwards. And the same can be said with the locks. We've had two of our best locks of all time retire, and there's no heir apparent for those two because those two guys were, when you look at Whitelock and Metallic, they were 202 and 203. Those are big boys, world-class size and world-class rugby players. Well, there's no heir apparent for those two guys because the players that we have at lock at the moment are all under 2 metres. And, so I think that Tui Pelotu's over 2 metres. That's the only one. So there's going to be some changes there too, and some developments there. So he's got, a big job there in the second row and a big job in the third row, in my opinion. And now with the retirement too of Smith, it's a whole new world, and Moanga. It's a whole new world in 9 and 10. They've just played a 12 and 13 combination, which no one's seen before, against Fiji, and they were outstanding. And that's really throwing the cat amongst the pigeons with the midfield backs. And a couple of the outside backs were exposed big time in defence. And so there's going to be a growth there. So I think we're at a very interesting stage.
Let's look at the loose forwards, because obviously this is your fundamental area of expertise. And the thing that you've drummed into me over a couple of decades talking to you, and I repeat back to you ad nauseum, is combinations. And also the individual jobs complementing each other. And I'll add to that also the relationship between your number 9 and your number 8. So who we saw Papali'i at 7, we saw Ardi at 8, we saw Samipeni Finau come in at 6. And then, of course, you now add into the mix Ethan Blackadder, who played 7 against Fiji, made a good account of himself. Does he play 7 or 6? He adds that line-out option mix. You've got Sam Cane coming back, and let's not forget how outstanding he was at the World Cup, and you were there like I was as well. And that game against Ireland especially, he was absolutely brilliant. Well, a fully fit Sam Cane, to me, remains the best number 7 in the country. But I stand to be corrected here. I'm looking at rejigging that loose forward trio also, because I didn't think Samipeni stepped up in the way we wanted to him against England. He wasn't the enforcer that Jerome was for the All Blacks. But then again, that position takes development, like Shannon Frizzell did. But your thoughts on this, because we do have a number of names now, and I'm not sure who the best loose forward trio is, but I would like to bring Sam Cane back.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things there, Martin. You've asked me a lot of different questions.
I know.
I'll try and peel them off one at a time. I think we have to understand today that, and it always has been actually, it's about ball possession, how much possession we've got. So the most crucial area in the game where you compete for possession is in the air, aerial possession we call it, eh?
Yep.
So that's kick-offs, that's kicks, and general play, line-outs, etc. So you really need 2 specialist aerial possession players in those loose forward trio, because if you look at history, in the immediate past history for the last maybe 20 years or 30 years, that is the case. You have to have at least one loose forward who is really, really good in the air and really tall, probably 2. So I'm saying, well, look, we're not an also-ran team. We want to be number 1 in the world. So we need 2. We need 2 specialist aerial possession players in your loose forward trio. And Finau's the only one that's big enough at this stage, because the other players are all under, they're all 190s really. So there's an issue there. I think Finau will come through with time. Remember, he's only had a couple of tests, and it looks to me like he's got the ruggedness and the toughness, and he's big boy. So that's a good start. But really, when you look at Blackadder, as I've said on your program before, I think he's a specialist open side flanker. I don't think he's a 6 or an 8. He could play there, but I think he's an open side flanker. And obviously, Raza thought that, and he played him in the weekend, and he played really, really well. You've still got to have the hunter and gatherer, and that's what he is. His work rate is huge. Sam Cane is similar. His work rate is huge. Those 2 players are specialist open side flankers. So there's a lot of sorting out to be done there, and nobody knows what's going to happen. But, one thing we do know is that if Ardi had some support as far as aerial possession is concerned, then he's, probably the best in the world at number 8. So we're smiling in that regard. And I think we've got a lot of contenders at 7 and 6, but I'm not sure in 12 months' time whether all those guys will be still contenders. They'll have to find more players with a bit more size and a bit more aerial ability. So that's my view there.